Okay, welcome to the 303rd episode of the Blair Dunkley Experience. My name's Patty. I'm a certified mind model coach and I'm your host tonight because Blair's not going to be here due to health issues. So he is normally here. He is the creator of mind models, and he's tested these and applied these in a wide variety of mental health situations with 80% effectiveness. This experience, what we put together tonight, is a free gift to you. And he teaches and coaches, and that's what we're going to be doing, is teaching and coaching mind models so you can experience effective change in your life. So what can you expect tonight? We talk about mind models, and mind models are simple thought frameworks to help us put names and labels to how we think. When we understand how we think, we can learn to think more effectively and create identifiable, repeatable, and duplicatable behaviors needed to finally break out of stuck states. Personally, my models have helped me overcome more than a decade of depression. They've positively impacted every area of my life, including my relationship with myself. So we welcome you tonight and look forward to getting to know you better. Let's see here. Our new material, we're starting a new series, and I believe, Brent, we are live on YouTube tonight. Would you say that's true, Jane? I'm not able to hear you, Jane. Are you muted?
I am not now.
Okay.
My thing says that we are recording, but we are not live on YouTube. Have you actually triggered that?
I don't know how to trigger anything, so I don't have an answer to that.
Okay.
I thought that we were going to be live on YouTube, but
No, it's an actual, you have to push a button. So you have
if you can tell me what button to push, I'm more than happy to push buttons.
Okay. For me, it's at the bottom. Yours might be at the top where there'll be three little dots where it'll say more. And
I got dots. Yes, I've got dots.
does one of
Okay.
them say YouTube?
One of them says record and one of them says caption. I don't have any more choices than that.
Okay, then I don't know what to tell you from this point.
Okay, maybe Blair has an extra dot and we'll ask him about it when he comes back.
I can post it on
But
YouTube.
for now, we'll record this and post it. So our new series is navigating acute and chronic stress and discovering how to manage yourself in a stressful world with mind models. So we're going to be covering this topic in 4 areas: causes and sources of stress, how we react or respond to stress, the victim mindset or victim mythology, and how to be proactive with mind models. So the question we're going to throw out to the court today is, what is stress? How do you define stress for yourself? So Brent, do you want to start us off? What's stress?
Uh, I well, it's not one thing for me. It's a wide range. It's different type of stressors in different areas of your life, different things you do. Physically, you stress the body to grow, physically, and improve the body to strengthen it. So there's stressors there physically. But the big one, for me, and most people, are mental stressors. Environmental and mental stressors. Those are the big things. Responsibilities, things that build up. That's what I would say causes the most stress for me, is responsibilities and work that has to be done. So that's mentally is a little more difficult to navigate, but the mind models for sure help with that, to figure out how to move forward and not stay stuck in that spot. Um, so, but yeah.
All right, Leslie, what is stress for you?
Um, Not being in control, not understanding a situation, massive frustration because things aren't external. I don't want to blame people, but external things are not working the way they're supposed to be working.
Mm-hmm. You're gonna love Tim's mini stack tonight. Just saying.
All right.
Jackie? Jackie.
One thing I noticed, and this is going to sound really obvious and really silly, maybe, but I just realized stress is a double-edged sword. It's like there's the ineffective and the effective stress. I never figured that out before.
I was going to say I really hadn't thought about effective stress until Brent mentioned it as a way of growing. The stress.
Clarity. I mean, I thought, like ineffective stress where your body is like, and you're like cramming everything into the imagination. I kind of labeled that as somewhat effective stress. However, with what Brent was saying, there is an effective stress when you're pushing yourself to the limit, and you're, I guess, failing fast for falling forward might be a way that you might utilize effective stress. I just honestly didn't see what I mean. It was, yeah. Anyway, it looks like Jane wants to say something.
Yeah, go ahead, Jane.
I think of stress. I know when I feel stress. So like if I have a deadline due and I'm not ready or I'm not yet done and prepared for it, I might feel an elevation of nerves or even heart rate. But I think of, from a medical standpoint, there's a test, they call it the stress test for the heart. And what they do is they have you get onto a treadmill and it raises the heart rate above your normal resting or standing place. So anything that is above normal to me is when it might be stressful. So like if the kids are all yelling or there's an idiot on the road and you're in my way, kind of things, those can raise me from my normal level of calm or level of maintaining peace or whatever. Those things to me are what I classify as stress. So even just something as getting, a piece of mail, I might say, oh, it's from my sister, or, or it's a bill that I know is like, those can cause me stress because it raises me out of my Zen peaceful bubble. How's that sound?
That's interesting. I'm so stoked about the different perspectives on stress. That there are things here that y'all are I would love a Zen bubble, me too. There are so many things that you guys are bringing up that really hadn't been part of my awareness. So Christine, what about you? What's stress for you?
So I think I divide stress into internal and external stress. Certainly before sobriety, I let a lot of external stress create internal stress. Now I find there's very little external stress that impacts me. I choose to have that impact me or not. So like if somebody cuts me off in traffic, I could care less. They needed to get somewhere faster than I did. Financial difficulties, they're going to work out just fine. Don't stress about it. I haven't lost sleep over anything in a long time that was external. Where I get caught up is the stories in my head that invent stress. So I find my stress is largely self-created. And it comes from negative self-talk, interpretations of old stories, lack of understanding of who the situation and circumstances around which I created that story, a lack of understanding that I invented the story, that there may be a kernel of of the story that may be truth, but majority of the story I've invented over time and embellished upon it over time to make it a lot more dramatic and a lot more awful in my head. And so in sobriety, I've been able, and through the mind models, I've been able to learn, because in sobriety, I'm more attuned with the mind models. I'm able to, if more effectively, notice my emotions and notice when I'm creating those stories and then
Mhm.
make choices that drive a different outcome and a different set of behaviors. And part of that is not being focused on the outcome. They drive a different outcome, but I'm detached from the outcome. And not 100% of the time, but that is the majority of how I do things now. I am told that I'm much calmer and more centered than ever before. And for me, that's been a combination of sobriety and mind models.
So you're more process-based, you're living more of a process-based life as opposed to driving for specific outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that it's not that I don't have like high level goals, because I do. But they're really more of a point on a journey. They're not a destination anymore. Whereas they used to be the destination. And if I didn't get to the destination, that became a new story that I told myself about how horrible and awful I was, and I would lose sleep over it. And not being fixated on the destination and falling in love with the journey makes stress less of a thing for me.
Okay.
Christine, I'm curious, how much personal choice do you see coming into your level of stress and how it affects it?
I'd say that it's all my personal choice.
Yeah, because it reminded me of react or act, like you're choosing to act rather than like do your knee-jerk reaction and doing
It's
behaviors.
Yeah, there's a combination of taking a pause when I feel something, and I call it respond. It's either I can react to something, or I say that I respond to things. So I can either react to something or I can respond to something. And a response requires an intellectual engagement and a choice.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to divide stress tonight for the purposes of our discussion. We're going to divide it into acute stress, which is short term, comes and goes. Episodic acute stress. So this is stuff that happens on a regular basis, but you don't get time to return to a place of calm and relaxation. So first responders experience a lot of this kind of stress. Chronic stress, long term, goes on for weeks, months, can be years. Things like financial issues, marriage difficulties, family conflict, caregiving, chronic health challenges, chronic pain, those kinds of things are long-term stress. So I'm curious, Christine, where do you feel stress in your body? Do you notice where you experience stress in your body?
Yeah, I mean, it's my throat primarily. Like, yeah, like if I'm sick, or if something is bothering me, then like last week I had a complete meltdown. That and Patty, you know kind of the rationale, what happened, what the cause of that was. And it sits in my throat. So when that happens, my voice drops even further, and I already have a man's register for a voice. It just, that's where it sits, or right here in the back of my head. Yeah. And so I have trouble swallowing. So.
Okay. Leslie, are you aware of where you feel stress in your body, where it goes?
I'm not so sure, other than it's an overall physical angst.
Okay. How about you, Brent? Are you aware of where you feel it in your body, where it goes, stress goes in your body?
Yeah. Muscle tightness, especially my neck, my traps.
Okay.
For sure. I know I don't sleep well either. So I'll wake up, my back will be tight, so I'm not sleeping well, moving. Skin as well. If it's a large amount, I'll notice some skin issues. If it's like a longer period term of stress, like high amounts, I'll notice some skin issues. Mostly like eczema comes up. So
Oh,
things like that will cause it. But I mean, that's where I notice it. Other than that, I'm not sure. I haven't really noticed like a sickness or anything like that because I haven't really tried to do like the long-term chronic stuff. Stay away from that so I don't end up with sicknesses or something that builds up and causes it. So, but I haven't noticed that. But yeah, other than that, it's just the muscle tightness, and then skin things come up. That's that.
Interesting. Jane, how about you? Where do you feel stress in your body?
I usually get it in my neck and my shoulders. That's where I'll notice it first.
Okay.
Also, this is gonna sound weird, but I get it in my forearms, right here on my forearms. Because it's probably from clenching my freaks, and also my jaw because I clench my teeth. So
Okay.
this is all a system. It's related to the shoulder, and therefore it goes into my forearms as well as my jaw and clenching my teeth, and that also affects my neck as well. So it's usually where I notice it. And then also my feet, believe it or not.
Yeah. So Jackie put in that, let's see, that she had it and then it slipped here. Okay, that she gets, she feels her stress more in the gag reflex area. Do you have anything to add? Where do you feel stressed, Jackie?
Oh, well, I'll kind of
In your
give you a
body.
little bit of a background. So when I was like 15, I became bulimic. So I was eating and stuffing all of my feelings down. And then I would throw them up. And then I would have to eat again to stuff them all down because I released the energy back into the world type of thing. So and even though I've stopped, I still have to be careful with tendencies with pickiness of food and blah, 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 blah. But when I get stressed and I haven't caught it, which is unusual because it's like going from like right into reliving something, like you just all of a sudden are there. I'll get this like dry heaving, and I've got to say, like, what the hell is going on? Because I haven't quite figured out like what it is that allows me to switch that quickly and just appear there. It's like I can't quite notice what happens before I get that third. But when I stop and I say, what's going on? Then I start to kind of remember what I was thinking about. And it's like, oh, yeah, that's it. Oh, you know what I mean? Anyway, so
are you able to shift yourself out of that?
Yes, with lots of like.
How do you shift yourself out?
Well, first of all, I need to tell myself like I want to breathe because I'm not breathing. I'm really not breathing. And like I want to, oh God, you know, take a lot of deep breaths, and I'm just like trying to center myself. Like, where am I? What's going on? What's around me? Yes, this is the wall. This is the couch. Yes, my hair. Yes, you know, like whatever. Oh, I can smell fresh air, or that breeze is really nice. Like trying to bring myself back into the now. But it's still interesting that I haven't been able to catch those 3 or 4 thoughts before I actually get to stress. Like I haven't. Anyway, it'll come. You know, where I'll be able to break it down and start to notice that I'm putting myself into overwhelm. When I'm overwhelmed, it's, I guess, the same thing that I call stress.
Yes, that's definitely one of the feelings that I get when I'm feeling stressed, is that sense of overwhelm. But Well, guys, I am really excited for Tim and Becky to be here tonight to talk about. Tim just kind of dropped it in at the end of the last VDE, and I picked up on that. I thought, oh my gosh, that's something I really haven't given a lot of thought to. But they navigate a lot of their stress using self, other, and situation. And I hadn't looked at that in terms of being a management sort of mind model. I looked at that as being more of an awareness thing. But Tim's mini stack, which Jane is on the very, very back of it's on the last page of our prep notes. But he's using control versus influence, self, other, situation, and situation, people, process. And I wanted Tim and Becky to share. Not only have they gone through some serious acute stress, but it's acute stress that ended up with life change, a great deal of life change that followed the acute stress. So they could have gone into a place of chronic stress with that, but they manage differently than many people in their situation have. So Tim and Becky, you want to go ahead and talk about stuff?
Sure. So I brought it up, as you mentioned, on the last BDE as self, situation, another, and control versus influence as by far my favorite mind models. If I had to put, I mean, I use them all interchangeably, as been mentioned before on the BDE. They're kind of like dominoes. Once you use one, they kind of, one leads to another. And definitely having them all in the toolbox has been extremely beneficial. But the interesting thing about the mini stack that, as it's been called, that I put together is this was something, and I like I said, I mentioned this in the last BDE, when the worst tragedy of our life happened back in 2020. The very first mind model that I went to was self, situation, and other, and control versus influence. And I tout. Sorry, what?
Sorry, I was just remembering your situation and giving a big sigh, because the first thing that I remember after I knew it wasn't some sick joke was, I hope these guys stay together, because you were such a beautiful couple. And I know that sounds cruel that I wasn't thinking of your girls, but I just wanted you guys to stay together. Anyway, sorry about that big sigh. I wasn't meaning to do that.
No, and I appreciate that, Jackie. And as I mentioned last BDE, I am grateful for Blair for these mind models. We had been certified as mind model mentor coaches the year before we lost our girls.
Almost a year to the day. Actually.
Yeah. And I have no doubt that there was divine guidance there. But one of the very first mind models that I went to that day when my life completely flipped upside down was control versus influence. First of all, it's kind of my gateway, if you will. The first thing I ask myself is, what in any given situation do I have control over? And what can I influence? That is the first thing that I go to. And then that sometimes it's a little more in depth. Other times it's just a quick recognition of what I have control over and influence. And then I immediately go into self, situation, and other. It's okay. Now that I'm aware that I can only control myself in this situation or with this group of people, what can I influence in the situation or with others that I'm with? And then from there, it's a level of acceptance comes next. And that's all part of that situation people process. That's that whole movement. And acceptance is also in there kind of on the tail end. There's that recognition of, okay, this is what it is. Now, what do I have control over in this moment with these people? What can I influence? What can I do? And then that gives me that traction to move forward. And that day when our life was flipped upside down and there was a ton of stress, when there was search and rescue running all over the place, when I was frantic attempting to find my daughters, and, and just panicking. Like I can't, I don't even know how to describe how I felt that day. Well, other than I felt completely robotic. I felt like I was going through the motions and just extremely focused on one task of finding my daughter. But that mind model of control versus influence and self-situation other and acceptance was just constantly flowing through my head. And people have asked us ever since then, how come we're still together? Because a lot of relationships end after something tragic like that. And it's because of my awareness of my control in that situation with the other people that were involved, what Becky's level of control was in the situation. People have asked, have you ever blamed her? Does she blame herself? And again, we come back to self, situation, and other. What could we control? Could we control the weather that day? No. The weather was doing what the weather would do. The canyon, the water, everything was doing just what it normally does in nature. We have no control over that. We were doing the best we could in the situation that we were in with what we had control over, and the rest is out of our hands. And that's that level of acceptance. And I mean, that was just kind of a synopsis of that day, that our life was completely flipped. That I have used this, like, for example, today. We had a very stressful day. We are transitioning. We were down in southern Utah. We're actually flying out to LA, and we had a whole bunch of things that we needed to get ready for tonight so that we could be here as well as we can fly out in the morning. And traffic today was super awesome. I'll just say that. And we were kind of running behind. And so as we were going throughout the day to day, we had to be here and had to be here and had to be here, and we were running behind. And I just kept walking through again. What can I control? I can only control me, my vehicle. I cannot control the other vehicles on the road. Let it go. That whole self situation other. I mean, that's just kind of today's example. But I come back to these mind models all the time. Every time I go outside my door, I find myself using control versus influence, which leads to self situation other, and then situation people process.
Do you mind if I share something?
Please.
Okay. So Tim talked a little bit about how we use them since the tragedy that we experienced in 2020, but I want to rewind the clock just a little bit prior to that, about a year. So when Tim and I went through my model method coach training, this is actually for me where situation people or self situation and other came into play, and also situation people process. Because Tim and I, we communicate pretty well. We had communicated pretty well, but we had at that point had an issue in our marriage that was about 8 years, 8-year long issue in our marriage that talk about stress, okay, with other people. If there's something that's not working, the outcome's not what you want, okay, you have the tendency, well, if only that person would do that, we're blaming and all those kinds of things. It causes stress in a relationship. And we had this thing that kept cycling through, right? It's just like, here, like, to the point where you just give up, like if nothing's going to change, you just have that certainty that this is just how it is. The really cool thing that came out of learning the mind models, specifically as it relates to situation, self, and other and people situation process, is that I was able to pin myself and utilize the skills for myself while also working with Tim so that we could come to a resolution. And instead of it being an 8-year, 9-year process, it's something that we were able to come to terms with individually and collectively in about an hour and a half, 2 hours tops.
Yeah, I remember being at my model coach, and first of all, we learned about naming and labeling. And so we were able together to put a name and label on the issue, because we had been, as she mentioned, we'd been having this reoccurring issue for 8 years. And it was like, neither of us understood.
We both wanted to blame the other because there was a problem and neither one of us were getting the outcome that we wanted. So we were stomping our feet like little kids, right? Because I'm not getting my way and he should fix it and she should fix it. And just all of the combustion of emotions without any real practical understanding, because we hadn't taken the time to get specific, to hear the other person out, to really give an ear to the situation. From a mutually grounded, self, both of us. Okay. So we got two self situation others happening here. Okay. but neither one of us were at a place, didn't have the skill set or the awareness of how to utilize that mind model to be able to integrate self into the situation with the other party. And so that's for me where it really started to gel is, okay, control versus influence. What can I control? I can't make him to do anything, even if I wanted him to. Okay. Just can't do it. It's not within my scope. And so what might I do? What might I do inside of these things to help this process move forward? Because we didn't want a rift in our relationship. We wanted, all these things. And so that for us is really can be the power within utilizing self-situation other inside of like a marital relationship, but then also when you're interacting with other people and specifically inside the tragedy that we experienced, very similar. We were both running our own process inside of self-situation other, and it was almost like they were just molding and moving together so that we could communicate effectively.
You know what? I remember that exact moment.
I was going to ask you if you remember, Jackie. It was
yeah. I remember we
day
were all
2 of the workshop.
we were like hustling off into our little corners, and I knew there was some sort of issue, whatever. And then the next morning, you came in and figured it all out, or at least a place to start and to move on from there. And it was unbelievable because you guys were so happy, and like even though we didn't hear about it till like first thing in the morning, like at 8 or 8:30ish, you did say that actually when you actually got down to the nitty gritty of it, it took you about an hour and a half or something. It was really quick, and that I just remember thinking, how cool is that to be able to have a partner that you can like actually have those conversations with. Anyway, amazing. I am so proud of you guys for handling this. And I'm not going to say so well because yeah.
I'm grateful. I'm just grateful for these skill sets. It's all the skill sets and just actually putting them to the test. Actually putting them. Self-situation and other specifically is very, very powerful. If you understand the control versus influence within self-situation and other, and then apply it. And actually, I appreciate what you shared, Christine, about your process earlier, because what I heard, at least what I was hearing, was very similar, that control versus influence, letting things go that are outside of your control and that level of acceptance. And it truly is that feeling of just the freedom of just letting things that are outside of your control go. It truly is a freeing feeling to know that you can just accept it and move forward. And that's what I was hearing. And so I appreciated you sharing that. That was powerful.
And
Hey.
Go ahead, Patty. I was going to say, one of the other things too with self-situation other, and I'm glad that you said the word acceptance because it just sparked something for me, is there's a level of simply awareness of what the mind model is. And then there's the next level of like integration and truly acceptance of your role, whether you like it or not. Because there's been many times where I've done this for myself. Like, okay, what can I control? I can only control myself. What's going on? Like naming and labeling all the other pieces, but I'm not happy with my role. I'm not happy with what I can't control because there's still that urge, that tendency to, even though I know that I can only control myself, I still want my outcome. I still want the outcome, right? Anybody else on here like that? Just me that wants the outcome.
It's not just you. It's
so
not just you. I've often said, Shannon and I have this discussion on a regular basis, that I don't think anybody is capable of a pure agenda. I think that our agendas are always mixed bags. We want what we want, but then, we start getting honest with ourselves and start looking and taking personal responsibility. We've talked about acceptance, but there's a level, what I'm hearing here is really a level of self-acceptance as well with what you're talking about. So go ahead, Becky.
And the acceptance, it is self-acceptance of your role, whatever that might be. And then, when you're working with situations or with others, there's this tendency to want to do more, okay, or wish you could do more, or if only that person would allow you to do more. So there's another layer of acceptance with inside of each other bit. So you have to accept where others are at. You have to accept what the situation is. Like, you have to accept in all areas so that you can then effectively utilize an effective process.
Mhm.
Because if you don't have a starting point, if you're not aware specifically, or as much specifics as you can get from the information that you have, it's very challenging to build and to actually have a how, because you're in info or an emotion, and you're just spinning. You're not actually making any movement. And so really it is choosing to accept, okay, things as they really are.
I think that's the biggest misunderstanding out there in the world today about acceptance. Most people think that in order to accept something, they have to agree with it.
Mhm.
And the thing is acceptance is truly just accepting something as it is, whether you like it or not. It is and it is. But that's where you gain that traction. That is where you can truly move forward, is simply accepting it for what it is, as it is, whether you like it or not. The question is then, what might you do with your control that you have
to influence.
to influence the situation, the people, and to move forward?
I love that Christine put acceptance equals compassion and detachment.
Mhm.
There's definitely a level of that is, allowing the emotional load for that, what you hope, what you wanted, and all the things, to simply go and be at peace and present with what is, so that you can. And I loved how you explained that earlier today, Christine, as you were sharing, it is so freeing, and there is such a relief when you stop trying to hold on to things that are not yours to control in the first place.
So what I'm hearing in this, and if this is too much of a reach, please let me know, but that I'm wondering, how much does unconscious incompetence add to our stress loads? So when you were talking about having that disagreement with Tim for 8 years, there's a level of, because you didn't have any names and labels,
Mhm.
that makes things unconscious. Without names and labels, that's part of what makes naming and labeling so incredibly powerful, is that it takes something from an unconscious level, makes it conscious, so that you can do something with it once it has a name and a label. Otherwise, it just sort of boils in our implicit memory. It's there, but we can't draw on it or do anything or behave to it at all. So but with that, you didn't have the skills to work things out, but you also didn't have a label, and you didn't know what you didn't know until you got to coach training and were given some skills. Is that accurate?
Yes. Yeah, that is very accurate. We both didn't, how do you put this? Didn't know what we didn't know.
Well, and to your point, Patty, it was unconscious, hadn't had a name and label. It was very general.
Mhm.
When we stay general with feelings and emotions, they can mushroom cloud very quickly, and they can feel completely overwhelming, and like they cover your entire scope of your entire life, way outside the bounds of the very specific issue. Okay, so when you talk about ripple effect and like spillover, the unconscious incompetency, I would say, is a huge barrier and a huge contributor to stress
Oh, sorry. And promotes denial.
and blame and a whole bunch of other things.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because we don't feel, we're not clear, we feel out of control because we're not getting the outcome that we want. Okay, and we have no measure of no way to measure, right? There's no clarity, there is no process. It is very general. And not until you have names and label and you start getting more specific and do some problem solving, can you truly get traction in the real problem itself, and then the emotional impact for both parties involved, in our case
Yeah.
specifically.
Yeah, Leslie actually alluded to this earlier. You mentioned that one of the stressful things was lack of control, lack of understanding, those that unconscious incompetence. When we don't know what we don't know, that is a big lead into stress. And I think that's where a lot of people get into a bit of that stuck state. Like, for example, in our situation, what happened that day, I had these skill sets to fall back on, and so did Becky. We're in this situation. What can I control? And then we were both working through that self situation other process. But a lot of people don't know what they don't know, and they don't have that name and label, that process to work through. And so they immediately just stay very general. And that leads down that rabbit hole of guilt, blame, how come you didn't do this kind of questions, and what if this and what if that? And it just tends to spiral out of control because they're just simply unaware of a process.
They don't have a process.
They don't, yeah.
That they can actually identify, right? And the other piece that comes up for me as we're talking about stress is expectations. We have a lot of unreasonable expectation of ourselves and others.
Yep.
And so when we are being so unkind to ourselves by putting that load on, we're literally picking up a stress backpack. And we are just walking along, picking up all these rocks and just drop them in the bag. Like, hey, that one looks nice, right? That one over there, that one's really pretty. I want to take that home with me too. And if we don't have the ability to name and label, describe our feelings, get some sort of utility out of the specifics of what's going on for us, either for ourselves in the situation or with others, even naming and labeling what's happening in the situation, we don't have the capacity to let go. We haven't identified roles and responsibilities. We haven't identified our role. We haven't talked about control versus influence and identified anything. We're just reactive.
Yeah.
And
your content at that moment. I mean, how could you not be? And trying to move to process, and then having other people trying to move process and not be in content must have been so challenging.
I mean,
Christine, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. No, I was going to say, Christine, you look like you're relating to a lot of this. I'm seeing lots of head nods and smiles. So how are you experiencing this discussion?
Well, there's, a lot of, and by the way, Tim and Becky, it is so great to see you both. A lot of what's being talked about is stuff that through my exploration of through my level of curiosity that I've developed as a result of being sober, are things that they're tools that I use to live my life every day so that I don't pick up a drink or use again. That the whole concept of acceptance, right? That's just huge. And the control and influence and enabling, naming and labeling, these are all concepts that I work with my sponsees on, even in the 12-step program that I'm in, because it's, and I've said on this, on this call before that, the word anger, which is it's such a huge bucket, and it's a label that people use, but I get to be more specific about my labels. There are over 60 synonyms for the word anger. Which one am I feeling? Am I peeved or irked, or am I murderous or rageful? And then there's, 56 plus in between there. And that gives me the ability to choose how I'm going to respond to different situations that I can either influence or that I have control over, because my response, the response I choose, has the ability to influence others and may have the ability to influence others, or may have the ability to influence a situation. But it really is about I think that I love what you guys are talking about, because I can only control me. I can't control anyone's reactions to me. I can't, I just can't control things. I can't control anything that's going on. My degree of, and this is not mind models, but there's a really great book written by a Stanford professor called Determined, and the entire premise of the book is that there's no such thing as self-will. And when I think about that in the context of mind models, right, even in terms of, do I have control? What is control, right? Every decision I make is influenced by where I grew up, who I grew up with, the education I have, the environment I live in today. It's like, do I really have any control? Like, really? And so coming to that reality, that realization for me, and recognizing that as a reality and picking up on your language, Tim and Becky, is so freeing. It's just, I don't have to worry about any of those things. And then when something happens, I may not like the outcome, but it's okay because I'm going to be okay. The rest of the world can burn to hell around me, but I am going to be okay. I'm going to be just fine. Right. And that, from a stress perspective, that's like, it's really hard to be stressed when you feel that way. It's just really hard to be, it's like, what the hell to be stressed about? Right. My husband could come in and say, Christine, I'm leaving you. And I'm like, that sucks. But guess what? I'll be okay. It's just, I'm going to be okay. And so, yeah, that's why I'm just nodding my head, because a lot of what you guys are talking about are things that I've gotten significantly better at the further I've gotten away from a drink and a drug. And so it's just, it's very validating to hear you guys talk about it. It's always good to have your thoughts validated. So.
Yes, I hear you. Matt, you joined us a little later. We're talking about navigating acute and chronic stress. And Tim and Becky were talking about the role of control versus influence in self-other situation and situation people process. So how do you experience stress, Matt?
That's probably the biggest part I'm the weakest at. I got a busy household. I got 3 kids, 5, 3, and 1. There's been some sleep issues lately. There's been some misbehavior issues. So the stress level has gotten a lot higher in our house, and it starts to build up, and it gets to the point, because it's a lot harder to manage in my eyes, because it's children that we're still trying to teach them to be aware. They don't notice what they're doing. You can try and bring it to their attention, but they don't know how to respond to what we're saying. So instead, they just continue to act out. So it's this this session 100% is hitting home for me, because we've actually had some pretty extreme stress in our house in the last couple of weeks. The kids have been not sleeping at all, where we had 3 days of literally no sleep in our house. They were up all the way through the night. So there was a point of a couple of weeks ago, I had a complete meltdown. Man tears were shed, and the girls and the kids got to see it. I made sure that they did see it, that they took me to my limit. I wanted them to understand that this is how far it's gotten. They did realize, and I still got it on my desk. My kids drew me pictures of how they seen how bad it was. They left the room, drew hearts, came back and gave them to me. So it's just a little helpful reminder that I need to be better, because there is certain times that stress gets to you, and you're a human, and your kids will push you to your limits, that sometimes voices are raised, and you got to just kind of be the stern one, but that's also part of life. But yeah, stress is all kinds of things right now, and it's learning how to manage it, because it's not like it's an adult where you can kind of just say, if you want to act like that, you act like that, and I can just be okay with it. But when it's your own kids that just keep coming behind you and poking you in the back, it's a new management skill that you got to learn.
I hear
I would
you.
agree with that. And thank you for sharing, Matt. One of the things, if you don't mind me just sharing, that we started working on with our girls, ages 3 and 7, well, 2 and 6, when we started going through mind models, it was we actually started utilizing the skill sets that we learned here with them. Some of the basic ones is, helping them describe their feelings, asking them those kinds of questions to attempt to come to some sort of awareness of where they were at, so that we could then, utilizing self, situation, other, and control versus influence, start to be more effective in the influence that we had within our home. Because kids or adults, you can't control another human being. You can impose laws, you can impose rules, you can have like all of the things to try and navigate or create the outcome that you want, but you're still working with another human being. And what we're talking about tonight for us, not only with ourselves, but also inside our household, was pure gold. With those girls, like, what are you feeling right now? Can you help me understand how you're feeling? That you could then start, creating that process with them, again, self, inside the situation, with others being your child or children. For us, this is what we did. And we started to see significant changes in the way in which the energy in our home was, because Tim and I individually were owning our own self.
Yep.
Okay? And we were looking at the situation of our household being, what do we want the situation to look like? What do we want for this? And the others was our daughters. Okay. Again, 2 and 6. I can appreciate some crazy that comes with those ages. And helping them learn how to communicate what they feel or how they're feeling, so that we could be more effective in interfacing within self, situation, other, with what we could control from a standpoint.
May
thing
I? Oh, I
You
was
know
just
what
saying,
I've just realized?
what?
That Tim and Becky, you were so lucky to have this type of training so you guys could get so close with those little girls. You had an opportunity that most parents don't have. Anyway, that's just what I noticed from tonight about.
Well, and the interesting thing too is when you get the little kids are like sponges. They just absorb, and they absorb it quick too. And it's actually, we found it was really neat because they were curious what mom and dad were doing on our, Tuesday nights
What are
when
you
we were on.
listening
Yeah,
to?
what are you listening to? What are you guys doing? And they always wanted to poke in and say hi. And, the kids are curious, just naturally curious. And so we actually found that it was very effective when we got off to go and sit down and say, hey, this is what mom and dad were talking about. We were talking about our feelings. What do you guys think? What do you feel? And so and they were naturally like, yeah, we want to learn. And they would just absorb it. And the interesting thing is our 7-year-old got to a point right before everything happened that she was mind modeling me. She was calling me out.
100%.
Those
Yep.
little kids, I tell you, like you don't need to like give them 1 or 2 or 3 examples. You just need to give them like one real experience, like in the moment example, and they get it.
One of my favorite things from Kinsley, our 7-year-old, was he was having a little bit of an issue one day. Daddy, are you in a why? Are you in judgment?
She totally called me on it so many times. Like she would come in and
Awesome.
how do you get upset with that? It was awesome.
So talk about a state change and influence of somebody else to bring you to the now.
Yeah. Yeah.
The emotion, because the specificity, just the awareness of being able to drop into, okay, for Tim in that moment, okay, what am I doing? Am I being controlled, or am I controlling myself? Like what's going on here? So again, Matt, thank you so much for sharing. And I hope that was maybe some of that was helpful for you in things that we consider doing with our children when they were around those ages, working through these skill sets.
Yeah, we've been trying to be more centered and be more clear about their feelings and making them the oldest one's not so bad because she's able to even like draw her feelings out. Like if she felt left out or something, she'd draw a picture like she did for me, come back and it's like all of us in the family, and then she's off in the corner feeling sad. So then she's able to do that. Our 3-year-old, it's a little different because she still doesn't understand her feelings. We ask her, like, how are you feeling? What are you feeling? Do you feel pain? Do you feel, and she can't describe it yet. She's still not at that stage where she can quite compute what she's feeling. So she's probably the hard, like she's been our issue lately of just trying to figure out how we can center her. So we do have little things like she's starting to notice, like if somebody's grumpy around the house, we call it the poop face. So just like she sees them, she'll see dad or mom grumpy, that's your poop face. So we kind of make it fun so they kind of understand, but at the same time they understand that there's somebody that's not feeling right or anything like that. So we're trying to find different ways and get them to understand what we're saying. But I think we've discovered a little bit of where it's coming from is our middle one they go to day home twice a week. And those seem to be the worst days because she also goes with our 1-year-old. And the 1-year-old needs constant attention because she's up and climbing tables and everything like that. So I feel like what we've noticed is every time she's going there and then she comes home those evenings, those are her worst days because she doesn't get any attention. So she's acting out to get the attention when she comes home. So we're trying to find ways that we can kind of make that, that switch, but it's a little bit difficult at the same time because she needs that attention a day home.
One can hear me.
Yeah.
Woo-hoo.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Go ahead.
Okay, there you go. I'm having issues. I'm just gonna say it really quick. A little board with stickers on them, or like the happy face, sad face, upset, and like point to that. And like when you're referring to it, I'm just doing this really quickly. I found it so effective when I was doing toddlers with moms that were abused. Some of them were in like diapers until they were 4 years old. I found it was very helpful and it was all before, like this was back in the 80s, no, in the 90s. And it was all before like cell phone smileys and stuff, but we had the happy face and the sad face and then all that. And if you kind of like go, I feel, and you point and you express, sometimes that kind of helps allow them to make connections, or like we don't know the words to express all of our feelings, so that was a very big helpful tool for me when I was teaching young children the life skills. And when they went home, because their moms were from abusive relationships, when they went home, the moms used to come back and report and say, my kid asked me how I was feeling last night. And what might you do differently? Like, because they do, like,
making them aware.
Absorb it. So anyway, I just wanted to, that wasn't very quick, but quickly.
Yes, I wanted to throw in, it's kind of an iteration on what Jackie is talking about, but I have 3 little boys. One is 3.5, one is almost 2, one is about 1.5 years. And what we've done is take headshots of people in their world with different emotion expressions. So we got their aunts, uncles, and cousins.
With technology. Amazing.
And did headshots. So this is what surprise looks like. This is what sadness looks like, and a whole range of different common emotions. Print those off, put the name on the back, and laminate them. And then it's like a deck of cards. And so it's like, okay, what do you think what do you think Aunt Susie is, feeling right there? What does that look like for you? Or you're feeling it, are you feeling anything that you think these people might be feeling? And, they can go through those things and identify that they're not the only one doing the feelings, but that helps them to put more accurate names and labels. And as, Becky was saying, the more specific you can get, you cannot behave to generals. So the more specific you can get, they can choose. If they're feeling more than one thing, they can choose. You know, I'm feeling this and this. Well, which one do you want? You know, which one works for you right now? And so we've found, especially with the 3.5-year-old, that this is making an impact for him when he starts to, want to throw himself on the floor because he's so got all these feelings and he can't tell anybody about them. We're like, okay, let's stop a minute. You put a name on that. What is going on right now? Can you use your words? Can you describe how you feel? Can you, these kinds of things. And not only does that take him out of the limbic center in the back of the brain and move him to the front, which instantly calms things down, but it also helps him develop a vocabulary. Yeah, Jackie.
Well, what was very interesting about that, which I didn't make this bridge before, I may have done it subconsciously, but is like, say, when you have the child and they're pointing to that specific, or an adult, that feeling, is there anything else you might be feeling right now?
Yes.
Because remember, we're talking about like the levels of emotions and what's up here, and like, let's take a deep breath. Okay, so what are you feeling right now? Like, isn't that amazing that we could probably do that and direct the brain that precisely?
Yes, it really is. It's really pretty amazing. Tim and Becky posted that he's having stress because he doesn't have a name and label for what's happening on the inside.
Well, exactly. It's the same for me. Mm-hmm. Until I like figure out at least something close where I can just like go, okay, I'll take a time out now, because I kind of, it kind of lets you settle.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
And one of the other things, like when you think about like stressing a point, it's putting emphasis on it. And so if we have something that we're putting emphasis on that is creating an emotional response, and we don't have an ability to identify that, it's very easy to tip into frustration, anger, overwhelm, because there's something happening and we don't know what's going on.
Yes, and so you react. You don't get a chance to choose.
And it's all, right? It's the fire hose. It's this flood of stuff that we don't know what it is. And so being able to start practicing thin slicing the emotions, again, Christine, like anger, there's so many different, like, is it peeved? Am I, pissed? Am I like, what am I? It allows us to become more in tune with ourselves. And the more in tune we are with the emotions, like the experience part that we're having, the more effective we can be with ourselves. And by virtue of that, utilizing self, situation, other, and control versus influence, those in our immediate purview, those that are in our, like the people that we interact with, because we have more awareness within where we're at. We're talking about like the control of emotions even. There's been many a time where I've been hit with a trigger or something else where I'm feeling, I've kicked into reliving automatically. My body is saying, this is what's going on. My brain's saying, no, it's not. And they're at war with each other. Okay. And so I've got to be able to utilize skill sets to come to an alignment and an understanding and an acceptance. Sometimes I have to let the emotions play out, but there is power simply in being able to be like, I am feeling these things. What I know is my current situation is not that. I have experienced something in the past, so my historical what's, and I'm going to choose to ride this out right now and then check in with myself in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or whatever. But the power of being aware that there is self, situation, and other, and the power of being aware of what control and influence looks like for you and how those play, and being able to describe and start building a process around description of feelings for yourself, so powerful in how you interface with your world, whether it's with children, whether it's with a spouse, whether it's a coworker, doesn't really matter what the situation or other is, because you have skills to thin slice and bring you to the now where you can actually act.
Yes, does anybody, because we're getting close to wrap up time here. Are y'all good continuing this discussion into next week? Because we like have at least half of the notes for this that we didn't get to. So thumbs up for next week. Okay, thank you. Anything that you would like to touch on before we start wrap up? Any questions or concerns that you would like to mention before we start wrap up? All right.
No, I would just like to wrap up though, and
Start us off. Yay. Go
thank you
team.
very much. I will give it a 9.5 tonight. Yeah, contemplating a lot.
Yeah,
Don't
it's a
really
lot
have
of
anything
thoughtful material.
that like specifically stands out, but yeah. Thanks for letting me participate. That really helped me process.
Well, thank you very much. Leslie, would you like to participate and wrap up tonight?
Yes. 9.9.
Ooh.
The 0.1 is yet to come.
That's next
This
week.
is,
Do that next week.
this is this has been very very enlightening, and just pulling a whole bunch of things together that I've not thought of. The whole thing about acceptance and is very positive in my mind, and something to work towards. Christine talked a lot about it, and so did Tim and Becky. Becky especially, about acceptance. It's yeah, we need to accept more. I need to accept more of situations, and again, what was re-emphasized in my mind is naming and labeling, which is still a skill that I am developing. That is my intent, is to develop it. It's an ongoing thing. Tim, I liked your mini stack. I've got a lot to ponder through on that, but I think that's going to be helpful. So yeah, 9.9. Tonight was great. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Appreciate your contribution. Also really appreciate your heart.
Thank you.
So Shane put in the chat that it was a 9 for him when Becky talked about acceptance. It really hit home. I feel that as a man, I just bury thoughts and feelings and emotions and just pull up my bootstraps and keep moving forward. I can tell you that was also a big part of my own heritage growing up. That was just what was expected. That's the way we lived. And certain amount of other things were just sort of irrelevant. So anyway, Brent, would you like to share your wrap up tonight?
Yeah. I like digging in the beginning was something Jackie had pointed out, like effective and ineffective stresses you have to help you grow, help you move, and some that will, that will harm you, over time, chronic stresses or acute stresses that, build up. But there's also, having too much and too little also can cause some problems as well. So, there has to be some sort of stress. Having no stress will cause problems. Having too much will cause problems as well. So, being in that, finding that spot and being able to deal with it effectively. Like Tim and Becky were going through very effectively how they handled that stress and what they did and the mind models they used to effectively handle that. So I definitely, and the acceptance is a big one there as well. The self-acceptance and acceptance. Like Becky's point out, if not, you get so worked up about things you really can't do anything about. So, yeah, I give it 8.5 for me.
Thank you, Brent. Matt, would you like to participate in the wrap up tonight?
You bet. I only was there for half of it just because we're getting the kids down, but it's definitely into the 9.5 for me. Just hearing some stories and just seeing the emotions behind how stress can affect people differently, I think is key. It makes me feel comfortable to know that, you know, we all go through it, but it's how we manage it and understanding how to control, allowing our emotions to stay on one side and not go to the other and mix to become a bad mixture, I guess what you could say is if we can kind of control those emotions before they start to build up and become stressors, we want to call them that. Yeah, it's I'm going to be definitely checking out the other half here, either tonight or tomorrow when I get a chance here, just so I catch up on the little bits that I missed here. But I'm 100% looking forward to next week. Because like I say, every week I come on here, just feel uplifted. It's just real life stories, real life people talking, and people being real, and just here for nothing but support. And I thank you all for that.
You're welcome. I do want to just address something that you said, Matt, if that's all right. Is that emotions just are. They're not good or they're bad. They're, you know, they just are. And they come from different places in ourselves. They come from our past, from our experiences. All of those feelings are somehow a part of us. So it's really choosing, is this particular feeling or emotion effective for me right now? Is this really working for me? Is this promoting the atmosphere, the influence? Is this, you know, yeah. Thank you, Becky. You're so good at the questions. I just love it. Becky put in, do I want to keep feeling this way? You know, do I want to keep feeling this way? Because we do have choice, and we are always feeling more than one thing at a time. So when we were doing the 10 life lessons, emotional self-management is part of the 10 life lessons, is how to be personally responsible for our emotional management. And that is also a big part of regulating stress, as Christine was saying. So thank you for sharing, Matt, and thank you for letting us into a little bit of your world. Appreciate that very much. So Christine, would you like to participate in the wrap-up tonight?
Of course, I'm never shy on having an opinion or having
I
something.
know, and I love every minute of it, but I have to ask.
Yeah, this has been great. For me, this is a 10. It's just Tim and Becky, I just love how you tell the story of how you've incorporated mind models, even from when you taught the girls mind models and started using that with them. And I think it's just, what I love about that is that, you know, the thing about children is that they are sponges, but they also question things. So if something is ineffective for them, they're going to tell you, right? And for you to have gone through that process of showing them how to use these mind models, even at the level that they were, is, to me, it's a testament that mind models are effective, because the kids were not like, well, that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, right? And they embraced it. And I love that reminder, because I know for me, one of the things that the journey that my life is on has really taken me back to my childhood, really taking me back to this childlike wonder that I get to experience in the world today. And that that when something feels right, I don't have to question it. I can just be okay with it. I can just accept that and experience it in that moment. And that's just it's a real gift to be able, at almost 60 years old, to walk through life like that. And so thank you for sharing that, and thank you for that reminder. And for anyone who's listening, mind models are freaking amazing, and they work. And And if you're not familiar with them, I hope you tune in and keep coming back, because they're going to change your life.
Absolutely. Absolutely, they will.
Yeah.
Here I am from the dark side. Absolutely.
Okay, Tim and Becky, would you like to participate in the wrap up tonight?
Yep. Go ahead, Beck.
I like it when you go first.
Yep, she's really on that.
See that.
I appreciate the opportunity to come on and share. BD has been a lifeline for us, and I can say that with accuracy. Learning the mind models has not been, I don't even know how to say this. Rephrase. Mind models have been the best thing that's ever happened to me in my life, besides meeting my husband. And even in that, because it allows me to understand myself, and it allows me to understand my world. It allows me to understand what I can do in different situations with people to be more effective, and to really dig into the core of who I am and who I'm meant to be. And having an understanding of skills and tools that allow me to become more, and to, by virtue of that, affect through influence with other people, is one of the greatest blessings of my life. Tim and I have been through a lot of stuff before we got together. We've been through a lot of stuff together. And mind models have been the not just what to think, but how to think about it, so that we can continue to move forward. And so I appreciate the conversation with self, situation, other, and control versus influence we talked about, because it is the core of how we interface with each other. There's a lot of other mind models that go into it that can layer and help support, but these specifically are ones that we adopted early on and have ran with as a core method in coping and being proactive and everything else, because it's the foundation for us. Adding in describing feelings and naming and labeling, but just those frameworks have allowed us to do so much that I can't imagine what our life would be like had we not had them. Going through, like, if we do a compare and contrast what was versus now in a short 5-year stint, dramatically different, which allows us to have more hope and possibility for the future, because we can be active participants in our lives, not just, reactive to things or situations as they come. We can actually interface in a way and affect real change for ourselves in creating what we want in our world.
Dang it. I let her go first.
You saw that.
I was going to say, I wouldn't let her go first. I think that's just a really tough act to follow. So
can I just say ditto?
I tried that and they didn't let me off the hook that time.
No, well, see, but it's not just ditto to what she said, but to what Brent said, to what Christine said, to what Leslie said, to what and honestly, that is one of the things that I love about getting on the Tuesday nights, and that I have missed with the time that we've been away, is I do enjoy getting on and hearing everybody's process and everybody sharing, how they work through things, and being very vulnerable. And I appreciate Christine and what you shared tonight, Christine. Right back at you with, I loved hearing your process, love hearing how you think through things, and I just connected with it so much. And Matt, thank you for your sharing, what you have going on in your world. Just so much heart. I can connect to your home. I can just see it, from what we experienced in our home. And it's a lot of fun. I know there's times of stress, but it's all in how we navigate the stress. And Brent, I love what was shared with the positive stressors and the negative stressors, and it's all about the navigation of that stress. And we can turn a negative stress into a positive stress. And it's all about how we navigate these with the mind models. And it's all about back to the naming and labeling, and just the understanding of control versus influence, self, situation, other. And we can truly navigate stress to the point where it can just roll off, and it is very freeing. And it's life-changing. It truly is. And so I'm, again, I can't say enough about the mind models, but specifically control versus influence, self-situation, other, back to what Becky was sharing about how they are just those foundational pieces of how we interact with our world. And I'm grateful for the skill sets. And it's a 10 for me tonight.
Oh, I didn't do a number. 9.5.
9.5. Okay, thank you.
That's
So
19.5 then, isn't it?
I
Okay.
suppose if you,
That's a new
yes, if
number.
you look at them as one box on the thing,
And
they get a
I'm gonna quickly put it in there. I said it a few weeks ago when you had the 300th episode. I think it's the BDEE, the Blair Dunkley Empowerment Experience.
Ooh,
Every time we come on here, the stories empower us, and I like that. So, thank you guys.
yeah, I agree with you, Matt. I agree with you. I am going to give my wrap up.
I was just
He's
gonna ask.
inspiration. He's gonna surprise her tonight. What?
I was just gonna ask, Patty, would you like to participate in the wrap up
The
tonight?
wrap up, yes.
Yoo-hoo!
I was going to surprise y'all by just doing it, but everybody seems to know me well enough to know that I'm more likely had to be asked. So, one of the things that hits me in listening to so much of this is how critical naming and labeling is. That we behave to the names and labels we use. So all the way from Christine getting very specific with relationship to anger, or getting specific in terms of the questions, what role do I have in this? Do I have a role? Have we, we always have a role, but do we necessarily ask ourselves that question and then give it a name and a label? Am I a passive agitator today? Am I controlling by falling apart? Am I controlling my world by not being in control of my emotions? What am I doing with my own choices, my own behaviors? And how is that not only impacting the stress level that I perceive for myself, but am I impacting the stress level in the people in my world? And when looking at my world through self-other situation, my desire, my intention is for a peaceful situation in my home. It's for accepting relationship with my spouse. I want those things. So am I behaving to those things, or am I shifting my focus away from those things and just onto this myriad of feelings that I'm having? What do I do with my feelings? I get to choose what I do with my feelings. And I can't really be effective doing anything with them without naming and labeling. So I just appreciate the power of that. When I was going over some of the things that Tim and Becky were going to do in preparing for this, I've got all my neat little models, and Becky's like, and describing feelings and naming and labeling, and describing feelings and naming and labeling, and describing feelings and naming and labeling. Like, okay, maybe I need to really look at describing feelings and naming and labeling. So, but I so appreciate the impact all of you have had tonight with sharing your experiences and your thoughts. And thanks, Tim and Becky, for being vulnerable and transparent with everything. So I would give it a 9 tonight. And thank you all for encouraging me to have a voice at the end of this. That's something that I have neglected and would have continued to neglect if Jackie hadn't really brought it to my attention. So thank you very much for that. Anyway, Jane, would you like to give us your wrap up and then take us out?
I would love to. Thank you. Tonight was very, very informative to me. I learned a lot. I'm going to start by saying I'm giving it a 9.5. It's kind of like giving it an A plus. There were so many different thoughts that I had, but I wanted to revise my term for stress. I used to play the viola. It's like a violin. And if you think about a stringed instrument, if you don't have any stress on the strings, it doesn't make music. If you have too much stress on the strings, you risk breaking the strings themselves and not putting out a good music. But if it's got the right amount of stress on it, and as you place stress, which is your hand and the use of the bow, you can make beautiful music. However, and you can also make really bad music. Just listen to any fourth grader. But in thinking about control versus influence, learning to play a stringed instrument like that, you can control the notes, but it takes the influence of the musician to take it up a notch or two or three or four into a really beautiful piece of music. And I think that that's just a wonderful thing. As humans, we need just a little bit of stress in order to be a little bit better. Too much stress, it breaks us. But we have the ability to influence. And I'm going to go one step further in the influence, in that you can control by putting your finger on to the neck and placing it there for the note, or you can influencing it by giving it a little bit more vibrato and making it a richer, more beautiful sound. And that's that was the music I was getting from Becky tonight when she was talking about influence. And so I want to say thank you. I wrote a ton of notes. I'm going to go back and relook at the situation people process, because I think that that's an area of growth that I would like to explore. But yes, in our home, we use self-other situation all the time to help illustrate and accept and see how a perspective is based on that particular mind model, that, you know, it's not about us and our why, you know, we have there's more to the picture. Want to say thank you to everybody for coming. I appreciate each and every one of your comments. It takes this wonderful subject and it makes it grow. You influence my ability to perceive something more. And so I appreciate that very much.
Nice one. Influence. I like
it
that.
Really does.
You're learning, you're like incorporating what you're learning, and you're also speaking it back to us. We're like learning again too.
Thank you. And it is that, I mean, I learned something tonight just that was beyond what I had before. And naming and labeling and describing feelings is something that I've needed in my life for such a long time. And so you notched it up another level for me tonight. So I appreciate that. I want to say, you know, the replay will be up. We didn't get to get it up live on YouTube, so it's not going to be available right away. Once I get together with Blair tomorrow and I get a chance to do the editing, it will be with us quickly. And I'm going to post the link for YouTube. You know the thing with YouTube, like, subscribe, and leave a comment. By leaving a comment, it helps the algorithm get it out to more people. And so, and then the same goes with Facebook. I've not been seeing very many comments on Facebook. I know that Blair is, you know, venturing away, but it's still there, and so much of our community is still there on Facebook. So if you get a chance to like, comment, answer someone else's comment, again, it helps the algorithm, and it's our way of saying thank you back to Blair for bringing mind models to us.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for being here. We'll continue this discussion next week.
Okay.
You take care, and until next week, we'll see you then.